Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And I am so excited. I'm up late at night here in my office working here in Venice Beach, California, because we have none other than Jake Steiner on our podcast. And we are going to talk about myopia and vision biology. And what's interesting about Jake, not only is he a semi-retired stock trader and investor, his personal passion is understanding human eyesight. And he has spent for the last, 20 years in vision biology science, exploring natural myopia control. Jake hosts the web's largest vision improvement communities with many tens of thousands of people, of participants, and he's written over 1,200 articles on vision biology and myopia control. Here's his origin story. He grew up with glasses. That's a 5.0 diopter high myopia. He'll talk about that in a minute. And today he has 20/20 eyesight. No surgery, no glasses. Figures out how it works and how to reverse it. No, not the eye exercises. His method of improving myopia, I always say that wrong, myopia, whatever you want to call it. In short, is a natural way of focusing your eyes to view at specific range of distances where the edge of blur happens. And by doing so, correctly and incorporates it into your daily life activities and allow your eyes to focus further and at a dark scenario at times go by. Increasing the distance of this edge blur bit by bit until 20/20 vision is finally achieved. He's joining us today from Thailand. So he's actually joining us from tomorrow today. But when you get this podcast, a few weeks will have gone by and we'll be rocking and rolling. Jake, welcome to the podcast.
Wade, that was the single greatest introduction I've ever heard.
Thank you. Well, we got something right. Well, I am so pumped about this. Now, I'm going to share a backstory. So, folks, a lot of people don't know, I have worn contact lenses since I went to university. I was put on glasses in grade 5. I hated my glasses. I was all excited when I got into contact lenses because it was better. I didn't like wearing glasses and stuff. And I've always kept I don't wear sunglasses a lot either because I like natural light hitting my eyes. But people always said, Wade, why don't you get laser surgery? Because I had heard these stories. I heard these stories about mystics in India that corrected their health. I read about a guy that was blind and corrected his health. I even bought his course. It was this complex thing that I didn't think I could possibly do. And little by little, year by year, decade by decade, I've thought about, one day I would like to correct my vision naturally because I believe it's possible. And I've always held this deep and within my heart. Never talked to anybody about it, actually. I never really said about it. It was just one of those little things that never come. And then I heard about Jake and I heard he corrected it. And I'm like, I wonder if I can correct mine. Maybe you can correct yours. Jake, can you tell us, how did you discover this incredible thing that most eye ophthalmologists say is not possible, can't happen, won't happen, but you figured this out? What makes you different from all these millions of experts around the world?
Well, I am no great expert. I want to tell the story. I wish I could tell a story of I went to India and I found the mystical guru on top of a mountain. But the actual story is far less fascinating. I started this whole thing, it was like 20 years ago. Back then, there was no easy internet, Google Scholar, where you can just look up science from your living room. I went to libraries, and basically the short version of what happened originally, I had the -5 diopter, super high, relatively super high myopia. My glasses were so thick that my eyes behind the lenses just were tiny. I had these little piggy eyes. And I was a single guy, and it was a vanity thing. I went to the optometrist because I couldn't see well at night. And they said, I need stronger glasses. And there was something about that moment where I was it felt like I had enough. It felt like I didn't want any more higher glasses. And I just asked, what causes this? And you kind of told in the beginning, my background is investing and stock trading and all things that are incredibly just analytical. You're digging for details and you spend weeks and months digging into contracts and charts and stuff. So I'm used to digging, and I'm used to asking questions and understanding what's coming back for answers. And when I asked the optometrist, what's wrong with my eyes, I didn't get an answer. And that started the whole wait a minute thing, because I'm like, okay, so how can you treat a thing that you don't understand the cause of? And they said it's genetic. And for me, that's always been a red flag. Whenever I hear genetic, kind of a cop out. And so I started going to libraries and I started reading about vision biology. And it turns out that the cause of myopia is incredibly well understood and has been for anywhere from 50 years to the 17th century. The cause of it's been clear, right? So I started there, and that's where the whole thing really kicked off. And I'm like, okay, so we know what causes myopia, but the optometrist either doesn't know or doesn't tell me. So what else is going on? And that turned into this whole journey that eventually led to me reversing my myopia.
Wow. How long did it take you to reverse your myopia from the time that you said you started digging, and then you figured out, so there's one, you start digging into how this happens and what goes on, but then you figured out, I'm going to fix this. Like, how long did it take you to go from, I want a different plan to I've got a plan to fix this?
The fixing it was took me a long time. I want to say like 10 years. The last diopter was off and on. Like, I would still wear glasses a little bit. I would wear glasses at night. Took forever because there was no clear plan. Like, the first step was understanding, and I really recommend for everybody who's listening to this, scholar.google.com is Google's search engine just for clinical research science. So if you want to find studies, right, like peer-reviewed clinical studies, I'm not saying they're all true, obviously, but if you want to dig into the real stuff, scholar.google.com, the first thing you type in there is pseudomyopia, or NITM, near-induced transient myopia, that will show you tens of thousands of results quoting peer-reviewed clinical science of where myopia starts, right? And to get back to your question, I started with understanding what causes the thing, and then figuring out that vision biology, like your eyeball, actually has a mechanism built into it that continually adjusts itself. So I didn't know that you could fix it, but I was reading these books that are saying your eyeball elongates because of lens wear. You're wearing glasses, your myopia gets worse because your eyeball elongates, but this elongation goes in both directions. So there's a mechanism built into your eye that continually adjusts the length of your eyeball throughout your whole life for perfect vision, or for what it thinks is perfect vision. So that's where I got the hunch that maybe I can reduce the eyeball length. And that turned into I didn't know how to do that. So I spent a long time playing around with different kinds of glasses and trying to figure out what kind of stimulus would work. Where today, now we're 20 years later, I can definitively tell you, you can improve by about a diopter a year, and it's pretty straightforward to do. Wow.
A diopter per year. Okay. So now I want to know, there's so many questions I have. So you're right, because it's like, okay, I guess the first thing is, like, how did you handle, obviously you probably drove a car and you had to deal with driving and not driving. So you went from, like, obviously it's a safety risk if you take, like, one of the things that I was like, I had heard about this medical doctor that just gave up his trifocals and fixed his glasses. He just decided that he was not going to wear glasses anymore, and he fixed his eyesight miraculously, and it took him 3 or 4 months, but he almost killed himself a bunch of times driving a car. I thought, that's a little too extreme. I want to fit within, I don't want to endanger anybody in my journey to bring back my eyesight to 2020. So what are some suggestions, or what did you do in that kind of situation?
So I'm always very dubious of claims of miraculous and very rapid change, because the root of the whole thing is your eyeball's too long, and your eyeball's too long because you've been wearing stronger and stronger and stronger glasses. I'm giving you the super short version. Yep. And it takes time for that eyeball to change shape. And I've seen people who've done it faster than a diopter a year. It happens for various reasons that we can talk about, but in general, that's about right. So anytime somebody says weeks or months, complete 20/20 vision, Maybe, but I haven't been able to validate any of those cases because I've contacted a bunch of people who've said they've done that, and generally it's been pretty sketchy. So I'm more of the conservative one who says it takes time. For myself, I didn't know what I was doing. So in the very beginning, actually, I went from a -5 to a -3. I just, based on the biology that says, so you have the retina in the back of the eyeball and you have the lens in the front, and the lens is a flexible piece that adjusts the light to where it hits the retina processes the visual information, right? And that the shape of that continually changes. So, and it changes based on something called myopic or hyperopic defocus, where the light hits the eye. I'm trying to make it not too long and sciencey, but that's the basic principle. So the idea is if I wear slightly weaker glasses, I'm getting myopic defocus, the light focuses a little bit in front of the eye, and hopefully the eyeball will shorten. And the key there is if you reduce too much, then you just get a bunch of blur and you're not going to improve. The idea is you want to reduce a tiny little bit. I didn't know that at the time. I went from -5 to -3. I was just starting somewhere, and I actually went on a trip to Laos with only with the -3 glasses, and it was just a bus ride in a little town in the middle of nowhere, and I couldn't see anything, and it was a terrible experience. So whenever people say I just got rid of my glasses, I'm like, maybe you can do it that way, but it is not going to be fun, right? Like the short version key is small reductions.
So in this case, you would have went to maybe -4s on your glasses instead?
Thereabouts, right? You buy an eye chart, you print an eye chart, you hang it up at home, and you measure yourself to where you're comfortable, like 20/30, for example, right? Like you don't need perfect vision all the way to the moon. You want to be legal to drive, which is 20/40 in the States in most cases. You want to feel safe and comfortable. You want to recognize people's facial expressions, but you want a little bit of that. You see a license plate across the street, you have to challenge your eyes to clear that up. That's the level you want. You just want a little bit of challenge.
Wow, that's really cool. So walk us through, like, as you went through your own journey, what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome in this process?
Well, first, I had no idea if it was possible. It was just, I'm not going up. And and the real interesting thing is during that time, I was traveling a lot. I remember in Italy, I met a couple of optometrists who said glasses make your eyes worse, right? Like only wear them when you need them. Older guys, super interesting. And I was in Russia, Ukraine, actually. Same thing. Older optometrists saying, only wear them when you need them. And that is absolutely the correct advice, because the first thing that happens is the first time you get glasses, they're not that strong. And if you were to take them off when you're up close, when you're looking at a screen, your eyesight wouldn't really get worse, not notably. So I found clues along the way, because most of the optometrists were just super dismissive. I made a habit of every town I went to, I would just go to an optic shop and ask the same questions. But I ran into these guys who were like, yes, it is the glasses. And I'm like, that's what I'm finding in the scientific journals, right? Like I'd go to libraries and dig around in libraries back when that was a thing. So I found all these bits and pieces, but nobody said reversing is possible. There were some books, right? Like Bates method and various things. I've tried all of those. They didn't work. So I was fairly discouraged. And then I wore those -3s for a year. And don't ask me why. I don't know why I did that to myself. But by the end of the year, I could sit in a subway and I could read the little sign on the other side what the next stations were, which I absolutely couldn't do in the beginning. So just because of persistence, I eventually ended up the point where I could wear the -3 and get about 20/30 vision.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, what about things like sunglasses and things like that? Did you wear sunglasses during that time, or did you avoid wearing sunglasses? Because there's kind of camps about whether sunglasses are good for your eyes or bad for your eyes.
My personal rule, and this is not anything scientific, is if I'd squint, otherwise I wear sunglasses. If I don't, then I won't. So some of them.
Got it. Okay.
And I have those transitions ones that just kind of clear up and get darker. That's kind of my favorite thing there.
Okay, great. Okay. So take a guy like me that's running a -3 in one eye and -225 in the other. And they actually changed that recently because I was at -275. And I've progressively gone. I think I started at 2, and then I've gone up to 25, over the course of 30 years. And maybe a little bit more than that, actually. And I want to reverse that trend. And I actually experienced a reverse. There was a period in my life where I actually went down, and the eye doctor I went from 2.5 to 2.25. So I had this little experience at one point, and I was like, geez, I wonder what happened there. That was about 10 years ago. And that's when I started researching, could I do this? And then I got distracted and didn't go down that road because of the inconvenience and not understanding what it would be. So what would your suggestions be for a guy like me that's done that? I guess you would get out of contacts and probably go to, regular glasses, because it's much easier to start playing around with things. Would that be accurate?
Yes, even though my biggest thing is I don't promote eye exercises or anything that is a significant lifestyle change whenever possible. So if you're comfortable with contacts and you don't want to change, you can definitely also do contacts. The first thing, and the first thing to address, is doing close-up. Like us having this conversation, you looking at the screen, you should be wearing something that's only strong enough to let you see clearly to the screen. There should be a little bit of that same challenge, right? Where when you're sitting at a comfortable distance from the screen, you're not squinting at it, but you're reminded that you're making your eyes clear up text. I call it active focus, but there's this, your eyes are sandbagging a little bit. That you can see better than you think if you challenge yourself.
Right.
And that's what you want.
I experience this sometimes. I wake up in the morning without my contacts, let's say, and some days I can see really pretty darn good in the first 5 minutes, and then it sort of fades or whatever after a little bit. Is that kind of like what's happening? Is it because, is there a relaxation effect, or is there some other factor going on? Any ideas?
Your vision might be better than you think. And one of the things, this is turned what you said in the beginning. I've written like 1,200 articles because there's so many nuances and details I found that you don't really need. But one of the things I always tell people is start off your day, the first 20 minutes, without any correction. Of course, if you don't have super strong glasses, but in your case, I'd be like, see how much of the morning you can go through without putting in those contacts. Like, appreciate the blur, appreciate the challenge, see what you can actually see that you didn't really think you can see before you put in the contact lenses. And then the next thing is, you don't need the ones that you have. Go a quarter diopter lower, right? But start your day out with as long as possible without anything, and then to put in a slightly lower contacts, and you're not even going to notice a difference.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, when you're going through this process that you're going to kind of, let's say, I'm going to initiate this process with myself, how do you kind of deal with the doctors or the eye doctors that have their version of what you should do? Or they say, hey, you're -3, you want to do a -2.5 or -2, or like, how do you deal with all that stuff?
I don't.
I love it.
So I'm kind of in two camps with this, because I think modern medicine has done amazing stuff, just amazing stuff. The eyesight, in my opinion, is not a medical condition. It's a refractive state. Your eye is 100% perfectly healthy. There's no illness. There's no condition. The eyeball has slightly elongated as a response to the lens wear. And you needed the lenses in the first place because they're the focusing muscle in your eye, from too much being tense for too long, because you're in close-up for too long, has a spasm. So when you look up pseudomyopia in Google Scholar, pseudomyopia is the muscle in your eye that controls focus is tight when you look at something up close. And if you spend 7 hours with that muscle tight, it doesn't fully relax. It's a spasm. So your early myopia, that 1 to 2 diopter, the first pair of glasses you get, is a muscle spasm. It's nothing else. And there's a ton of literature that's all in optometry and ophthalmology clinical journals that validates this. So from the beginning, you're being sold a treatment for not a condition, right? Like, it's literally called pseudomyopia, pseudo as in not a real thing, right?
Wow.
And those glasses, I'm going to throw this in here also just as a little extra comment. I have all the wholesale prices of pretty much all lenses being sold. And most lenses that have all the coatings and all the fancy stuff, brand names, between $2 and $5 wholesale to the optometrist.
Wow.
Paying $2 to $5 for those things. So I'm not saying there's any malice. I'm not saying there's any conspiracy, but their training and their focus and their business model is throw those things on you. You have an instant fix, and you come back next year and buy stronger ones.
So let me ask you a question. Would you go off to like a Walmart or something and buy the super cheap glasses or whatever for $20 or like tell me about that? Because that's what a lot of people are thinking they do. You would go to your eye doctor, get a prescription for 2.0 or whatever and move on. Is that how you would go about it?
By the way, whenever people say prescription, those clear curved pieces of plastic only became prescriptions when lens manufacturers spent millions of dollars lobbying for it, right? Like if you think about it,
beautiful.
They're just pieces of plastic. Like how is that a prescription? It never was. And in lots of countries it isn't. But for example, in the US, they want to control how you get to those things, right? Like how do you charge $100 or $200 for something that costs $5? Right? Like you limit the outlets.
You make it fancy. You get a guy in a white coat. You get an authority. You get these big machines. Must be true.
Yeah. And again, I'm not blanket saying that everything is wrong, but in this case is what happens. And most people want the quick fix. Most people don't want to go through the effort of figuring this out. They don't want to spend the money it would take for an optometrist to do all this stuff for you. One of the things technically, and it depends on the country and it depends on the municipality and your optometrist friendliness. There's no law that says they have to give you glasses that give you 20/15 vision, right? Like the DMV says 20/40 is legal. So legal requirement to drive is only 20/40. So if you went to an optometrist and said, hey, listen, 20/30 is what I want. There is no law or rule that I'm aware of, at least for California, that says you'd have to. They don't want to do that, though, because they don't want you to come back next week and because you fell for some internet unicorn farming thing and you're like, I hit some car because I couldn't see with your glasses. So a lot of them don't want to do that. But there's some that do. Like we have this big Facebook group and there's stories all the time of supportive optometrists, and you bring donuts and coffee and you say, hey, listen, these super strong glasses give me headaches, or contact lenses. I'm super great with 20/30. Can we do that? And some of them will be like, yeah, fine, whatever.
So is that where your usually starting point would be 20/30, or was it just based on whatever's better from where you are? So if you're a -4, you want to go to -3. Is it one unit? Is that your typical movement?
The first one, and it depends on the person, right? Like it depends on how strong those glasses are. Like if you print an eye chart and you hang it up and you can see the 2012 line with your glasses currently, you can probably go down by a whole diopter and still see 20/20, right? So the first one is a guess. And I always start out with close-up first. Don't mess with the distance at all. Like just keep whatever you're wearing for distance, figure out what you need for close-up first, right? So everything stays familiar when you're driving and walking. You start the experiment just sitting in your office, looking at your computer. If you've got -2 point something now, get a -1 pair of glasses or -1.25. And then see how you adjust to that. Spend a month or two just getting active focus, wearing those lower corrections. And then when you're all into it and you fully understand your eyesight, then lower the distance, right?
Got it.
So you work in a controlled environment. You're not outside. You're not figuring this out while you're driving around in a car. You're just sitting in your office and you lean back from your screen a bit and you go, wow, this is where it starts getting blurry. And you get familiar with that whole thing with your eyes.
And then I guess as you start to see improvements, this starts to build confidence and motivation. You start saying, hey, I'm starting to see some positive shifts here.
Yeah. And that's really where you're starting out. We have an app now. We have an Android app actually, and we have an iPhone app. The iPhone app just came out, so it's still terrible, that allows you to measure distance. So if you have an iPhone that does Face ID, you install this app. Of course, it's free. And as you hold it in front of your face, it tells you how far it is from your face.
Wow.
And if you pick the distance where blur just starts, you can take that number, 100 divided by that number is your diopters, because diopters is just a distance to blur, right? So literally with this app, you can measure how strong your glasses need to be, except we only give you distance because Apple's not going to let us talk about diopters.
Got it. So if we give it that formula again, it is the distance
100 divided by
100 divided by
the distance in centimeters.
Distance in centimeters
is that equals diopters.
Equals diopters. So for example, if it was 50 centimeters, that would be -2 diopter. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And also, just a little side note, this is a rabbit hole of a topic, and I never imagined myself being this guy talking about this stuff.
Right.
But all those fancy machines, all this stuff that goes on in your quote unquote exam, the only thing that happens is a measurement of distance before you see blur. That's it.
Right.
It's kind of a charade, because with this iPhone app or with just a measuring tape where you just sit in front of a book and you go, okay, everything's perfectly clear. You keep moving it back a little bit. And then all of a sudden you see the text doesn't look quite as clear anymore. You measure the distance, 100 divided by those centimeters. Those are your diopters. That's it.
Wow. That's so cool. It's so simple.
It is so simple, but it's a $2 thing that they try to sell for $200, right? Like that's the underlying theme.
Right. So they've got to create the grand poobah show, like the king has no clothes. Okay, great.
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes, as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
I want to get into you've got a website, you've got an app, you've got all these people in a Facebook group. Tell me about that, because it seems like this is a pretty extraordinary, quote unquote, movement. When did that all get started?
Oh boy, because just like I want to tell you the story of I find the guru in India, I want to talk about how I'm just this selfless, amazing person that built all this stuff, which is absolutely wouldn't be the truth. Actually, it was, in the beginning, it was a blog where I was just ranting about optometry. Like I was making terrible Photoshops. If you go back to that, it was basically a coffee in the morning. I'd spend an hour or two just letting it out and then getting back to my real work. And that's just what it was for the longest time. And then people started participating, and eventually somebody said we have to have a Facebook group and we have to have a forum and you have to make videos. And you can tell, like when you look at the whole thing, it's not very professional, right? Like the Facebook group doesn't even have like a banner thing. We didn't have a logo for the first 10 years. It became a thing because more and more people were participating and more people are pushing towards better answers, right? Like a lot of the stuff we know now is not me. Like I didn't figure this out, but it's, you take 10,000 people, right? Like a lot more than that, but thousands of people that have tried different stuff and let me know this works and this doesn't work. And we built this system just out of the community. So when you look at the site and you look at the YouTube videos and you look at how everything is a little janky, it's because it came from there. And I never really intended for it to be some polished internet, course sales thing.
But that's the internet. It just kind of starts to scale and all of a sudden it's out of control, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So in these groups, are people sharing their stories, or they're sharing what they learned, or what's going on inside there?
So Facebook group is kind of the lightweight version where this is like 18,000 or so members now. A lot of improvement stories, a lot of questions, a lot of beginners going, is this a real thing, and getting feedback. It's really interesting just to join and scroll through, because you get a little bit of an insight of how people are interacting with this, right? Because before it was just the website. Then we have the forum, which is where the nerdier stuff happens. Like there's a guy who bought the machine that measures the axial length of your eye. Costs thousands of dollars. Like it's only ophthalmologists buy that thing. And he's been measuring his axial length. And there's a huge thread of discussion about that. And people talk about how red letters versus green letters tell you if you're overprescribed or underprescribed, or corrected rather. So the deep dive topics are in the forum, and the little dip your toe in is the Facebook group.
Wow, that's really, really, really cool that you kind of got it. I think it's really neat, because one of the things that we love at Bioptimizers is we love doing what we call N of ones. You start experimenting. It's all great to be peer reviewed. It's all great to read all the documentation or listen to the expert. But at the end of the day, it's all what's applicable and how you can do for yourself. And we do hundreds and hundreds of tests on ourselves, and then collectively with group, you do thousands of tests, and then you start to see patterns. And then from these patterns, we can kind of collectively learn. And I think this is really cool. So realistically, you think someone that has a -3 could potentially, if they follow everything, could potentially correct that in the next 3 to 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, easily. One of the biggest factors is how much are you addicted to your phone screen, and do you have any sport or outdoor passions that you engage in regularly? Like we've got a little tiny podcast, and I talked to 2 participants recently that are surfers. Just coincidentally, 2 completely different guys, one from California, one from Ireland. Those guys always improve a lot faster because they spend a fair amount of time using their eyes in a real way, right? Like in an unavoidable, you're out there in the ocean, you have to see the waves. If you're wearing lower glass or contact lenses in that case, you will use your eyes. Those guys improve. I mean, if you said you're at a -2, 2.5 or so, and you surf, I would say in 2 to 3 years max, we should chat again, and you're going to forget that you ever wore contacts.
Wow. Now, is there any age restrictions in this? Because some people say as you get older, it gets harder, or younger. What's your take on that? Is that just another story?
97. That's the cutoff. The axial change of your eye works all the time. And I've also, in some of the podcasts, like there's some fantastic, slightly older people that are doing great work. And I think for them, it's even, in a way, it's something super invigorating, because your body kind of declines as you get older. And here's a thing that you can actually affect that makes you feel younger, because you can see the way you saw 30 years ago.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty powerful. I know I used to experience that when I used to train like senior citizens, and suddenly they would have trouble walking or being steady. And then we'd put them through a weight training routine. And after 3 months, they didn't need their walker, or they could walk very good, or they were able to do things or they started to notice that they didn't lose their balance, and they started to dance again, and all kinds of fun things that can happen. So it's interesting what's possible for humans. So now I understand that you offer courses, you have a program online. Like, can you tell me a little bit more where people can find out more about this, how they can get access to this, all this sort of stuff?
So I make a real serious point about putting out everything for free, right? Because this is not this is not how I make money. And this isn't, I didn't want to make it a thing where you're like, oh, you want help from me, you got to pay. So super important. Everything you need absolutely is free. articles are, there's a bunch of how-to guides, there's a bunch of videos, there's a bunch of stuff. Don't need to spend money. There are some courses for people who the value of their time is higher than their urge to do DIY stuff, right? So there's some super simple courses that are basically the community put them together. They took the 1,200 articles I wrote and condensed it into something that you can get through in a week that just gives you all the things that you need as one option. And then there is a more serious, like, I just want the steps. Just tell me what I need to do today, all the way through till my vision is perfect again. Also an option. It's under the resources link on the website. It's not super obvious because, again, I'm not really promoting to sell them. Largely, it's, again, if you don't want to do DIY stuff, and also it helps fund all the fun stuff like the apps and things.
Well, I'm all about those two. I'm all about the fast track. I'm the guy that doesn't have the time to read through everything. So I want to know where these links are so we can put them in the show notes so I can grab them myself. I'm totally being selfish here. Any other things that you can say, we can put those links into the show notes, if you can tell us where those sites are. Do you have those sites handy, or?
Yeah, it's just nmyopia.org. That's
Yep.
the only site you need. And at the top of the page, one of the links is called resources. And
Yep.
under resources, there's the courses and there's the Facebook group and the YouTube channel. Every article also on the bottom has the option to sign up for a 7-day email guide that kind of walks you through, because it's like a lot of stuff in the beginning. It's kind of overwhelming. So I broke it out into 7 days. There's no sales pitch attached to it. So it's literally just, here's where you start. It gives you kind of a week of overview. And I broke it down into a week because it really, if you skim through it, you get nothing, right? So I give you a day's worth of, here's a starting point. And then if you're bored and you want to read more, you can go through the site. After a week, you got a pretty decent grasp. And from there, you can decide if you want to just DIY through it, as most people do, or try course options. And I recommend people do like the 7-day thing first. Again, there's no sales pitch attached to it, just to see, is it for you? Are you tempted by this? Is this a project that you want to take on?
Now, what do you think would be the time investment involved in this? Is there any specific time investment that you say that you're going to have to, there's a bit of time and effort involved, and what do you think is realistic for people to expect?
Learning curve. 100% there's a learning curve. I would say the first month or two, think of it like a new passion project, right? Like you're learning a new sport or you're getting into a new thing you expect to learn, right? Like people will go, just give me the steps. What are the steps? Not going to work, right? Like you're going to immerse yourself. You're going to understand something about vision biology and about optics. I want you to have that understanding because I want you to know what you're doing, right? So when you see various internet eye exercise schemes, you can ask the question, how does this affect my eyesight, right?
Very
So
good.
That's really kind of where I would start out. And then after that, it's autopilot. Because what I found, eye exercises don't work because nobody has time for that. So once what I told you, for example, is wear minus 1.25 for your close-up, right? Figure that out. And then adjust your distance correction a little tiny bit. And once you are on that path where that's all working for you, the time investment is close to zero because it's just habits, right? Like
So you can build the atomic habits kind of philosophy of how to do things, these gradual integrations. That's really good. Now, what are some of the mistakes that people make, and I guess we'll start with that one first.
Going too fast. That is the number one thing. Like people get excited, which is great. But then they did, for example, what I did. I went from -5 to -3, or they try to get rid of their glasses completely, or they try to make a huge change to their lifestyle, which doesn't take, right? So it's really hard for people that are excited about this to temper themselves to go, I'm going to buy these glasses or contact lenses, and for the next 3 to 4 months, that's what I'm wearing. And it's a small reduction that I barely notice. Right. And you're not just quitting your job and becoming a forester or something.
Right.
Not entirely uncommon, especially younger people get super excited and then they circle back around a year later going, well, I guess. Right. And then they do it slowly just as a habit, because it's like diet or gym and exercise.
Right.
It's not about getting to this result, it's a lifestyle change, right? So
right, you wouldn't expect to go to the gym and squat 500 pounds in your first week. You got to go up progressive. So you're really doing a progressive practice to retrain your eyes in order to see perfectly.
yeah, and you're addressing habits too, especially because, for example, you're lucky, -2, -3, that's not a big deal. A lot of Asian populations in particular, there's some genes that have been found that are associated with how the eye elongates that is more present in some Asian populations. And so I have a lot of Asian participants that are -8, -9, -15, and they also have a real problem being addicted to phone screens. And that's when you run into trouble, because now you have high myopia, so it's going to take you a while. And you need to address your lifestyle a little bit, right? Like you can't spend 10 hours in front of your work screen and then the rest of the day in front of a phone screen.
That makes so much sense. And what about people who have had eye surgery? What's your take on people that do eye surgery, and what's maybe some of the liabilities of that coming into a program? Or because I've heard some people will get surgery and then like 10 years later they need it again. Or can people who have had eye surgery use this as a way moving forward? What's your thoughts on that?
Eye surgery, the contact lens that you put in your eye changes where the light hits in your back of your eye, right? Like it's a lens that changes where light moves. Surgery does the same thing, except it permanently cuts that lens into the front of your eye. So if your eyesight has been getting worse slowly before you had the surgery, the same thing will continue, right? If you've been at -2 for the last 20 years and nothing's happened, and you get the surgery and you have 20/20 vision, it'll probably stay that way. But if in the last 2 years your eyes have gotten worse, quote unquote worse, like they've just elongated, then 2 years after the laser surgery, the same thing will have happened again, because the surgery addresses nothing. It just cuts a permanent lens. So if you look up Morris Waxler, the guy at the FDA who got LASIK approved in the first place, if you just Google Morris Waxler, you'll see the guy is very firmly against LASIK now. He said it's a huge mistake, should have never been approved. Lots of issues, like that flap doesn't properly heal. Lots and lots of issues that the problem is that if you run into a problem, like suddenly you have dry eyes or starbursts or whatever, you can no longer correct that. Like that is a permanent move. So it's really risky as an elective surgery, in my opinion.
Beautifully said. This has been fantastic. I'm speechless that you've made this so clear and so simple and so factual based and research based and stuff like that. Any other things that you have noticed that people have trouble with, or things that people should do, or where they would get started? What would be your recommendations if they want to get started in following this process?
The best thing is to experiment. And my favorite thing to start with is measuring the distance. We've used measuring tapes for the last forever, and now the apps are still very early stages. They're nothing fancy, but just measure your distance, right? Measure it in the morning and measure it after a 4-hour Netflix binge, and measure it in natural daylight and in an artificially lit room, and notice how that distance changes, meaning your diopter changes. It's not static. So if you make that measurements once, twice, 3 times, 5 times, you're going to realize there's a pattern. 4-hour Netflix, afterwards your vision is notably worse. Artificially lit room, your vision is notably worse. That experiment gets people into the rabbit hole, right? Like doing a tangible thing where you go, this changes. So maybe I should put my office near a window, right? Like you start taking baby steps in the right direction.
Activates curiosity, right? That's the one that always gets you. Now you talked about an eye chart, about getting an eye chart. Where do you get an eye chart?
Just Amazon, or print one. If you search for eye charts online, there's 10 bazillion options, lots of free ones. Yeah.
Okay, great.
The one other thing, the biggest problem that I've been finding, and it's super alarming and really, really frustrating to me, I get hundreds of emails a day, and they used to be just people asking about the eyesight. The last number of years, it's more and more parents with more and more younger and younger children going, we went to the optometrist, my kids needs glasses. And what I always say, and what I wish everybody knew, is iPad, not a babysitter. Like putting your small child in front of an iPad is a super bad idea. And pseudomyopia will start. And then you take them to the optometrist, and then 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds end up with glasses. And when they do, their eyesight will adjust to those lenses every year, right? It's every year. And every year it's adopt worse. So super bad idea for letting kids play with iPads. I always say as little of that as possible.
Beautifully said. Any other items that we should know before we go forward on this? And I'm going to give this a shot. I'm really excited about it. It's been something that's been on my mind. I'm making a commitment to it to see what I can able to do, because I think it'd be just something that it just seems like such a fun experiment. So I want to give it a shot.
Set yourself some goals, right? Like a 3 months goal, 6 months goal, a year goal, just so you have, because you're going to be excited at first, and then it gets lost in a million other things. So just the first goal, get yourself lower correction for close up. So you have that active experience that you can't avoid every day. Try the first 20 minutes without glasses, and then set yourself a little reminder 3 months from now or 2 months from now to, 2 months is enough actually, to maybe reduce the distance correction a little tiny bit. And if you preset yourself like a little monthly thing, then you're much more likely to have success with it.
Beautifully said. Well said. Jake, you are amazing. Can you give us that site one more time?
It's endmyopia.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jake Steiner, the man who has a plan to correct pseudo-myopia. Don't rush, but it's worth it if you do it. He's corrected his vision. There's a Facebook group you can connect into. Check it out. Take the 7-day course. Learn this. The bottom line is, at Bioptimizers, we're all about biological optimization, and your ability to heal, your ability to regenerate, your ability to achieve your dreams is far greater than you might expect. Don't let some authority convince you about the innate power within you. It's Wei T. Lightheart from the Awesome Health Podcast and sponsored by Bioptimizers. I want to thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next thing. And we will give reports of just how well I've done with Jake's program. Thanks so much for joining us, Jake. Take care, everyone. Have an awesome day.
At Bioptimizers, our mission is to fix digestion. And a cornerstone of digestion is gut flora. P3OM is our patented probiotic formula. In fact, we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. You see, strong proteolytic or protein digesting activity is paramount to having a healthy gut flora. And of course, P3OM provides that. The good news is, unlike weaker probiotics, P3OM survives the digestion process. What it does is it basically multiplies the good guys while protecting you against pathogens, or what some people call the bad guys. P3OM really helps to rebuild your digestion. And what that allows you to do is to maximize nutrient uptake, energy, and metabolism. To find out more of how P3OM can help you, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.